There is a hormone inside your body that peaked when you were approximately 25 years old and has been declining every single year since then. By the time you reach 65, your levels of this hormone are, on average, 80% lower than they were at their peak. Not 10% lower, not 30% lower, 80%. And yet the vast majority of people over 65 have never had this hormone measured, have never had a conversation with their doctor about it, and have never been told that its decline is one of the most significant and most underaddressed drivers of the fatigue, the mood shifts, the emotional flatness, and the quiet erosion of intimate well-being that so many people in their 7th and 8th decade of life have simply accepted as the inevitable texture of growing old. The hormone is called DHEA, dehydroepiandrosterone, and if that name is unfamiliar to you, that unfamiliarity is itself part of the problem. Because this molecule sits at the center of a biological story that directly affects how you feel in your body every single day, how you relate to the people closest to you, how resilient your mood is in the face of ordinary stress, and how much vitality you carry into the years ahead. DHEA is not a fringe compound discussed only in anti-aging clinics. It is produced by the adrenal glands, measured in mainstream endocrinological research, studied in peer-reviewed clinical trials published in journals including the New England Journal of Medicine, JAMA, and Nature Reviews Endocrinology, and identified by researchers as one of the most abundant steroid hormones in the human body during the years of peak biological vitality. Its decline with age is one of the most consistent and well-documented hormonal changes in all of gerontological science, and its consequences across energy, mood, cognitive sharpness, immune resilience, and intimate well-being are documented in research that most people have simply never been told exists. I have spent years studying the nutritional and lifestyle science of healthy aging, and specifically the ways in which hormonal changes after 60 interact with how people feel, function, and connect. DHEA is the hormone I return to most consistently in that work, not because it is a miracle molecule, but because it is a central regulator of so many systems that matter. And because the natural strategies for supporting its production and its downstream effects are specific, evidence-based, and far more accessible than most people realize. Today, we are going to cover 4 things. First, what DHEA actually is and why its role in the body is so much broader than most people understand, including why it sits upstream of testosterone, estrogen, and several other hormones whose names are more familiar. Second, the specific biological consequences of DHEA decline after 65 across energy metabolism, mood regulation, and intimate well-being, with the research that maps each connection. Third, 3 evidence-based natural strategies, including specific foods and lifestyle practices that support DHEA production and amplify its downstream effects in the body. And fourth, what a realistic timeline of recovery looks like, because managing expectations is what determines whether people follow through long enough to experience the results that the biology is capable of producing. To understand why DHEA matters so profoundly after 65, you first need to understand what it does inside the body, because it is not a hormone with a single function. It is a precursor hormone, which means it serves as the raw material from which other hormones are synthesized. Understanding this upstream position in the hormonal cascade is what makes the 80% decline so consequential. DHEA is produced primarily in the zona reticularis of the adrenal cortex, with smaller amounts produced in the gonads and, importantly, in the brain itself, where it functions as a neurosteroid with direct effects on neural activity. Once produced, DHEA circulates in the bloodstream both in its free form and bound to sulfate as DHEAS, its storage form. In target tissues throughout the body, DHEA is converted locally into androgens, including testosterone, and into estrogens, including estradiol, depending on the specific enzymatic environment of each tissue. This local conversion is critical to understanding why DHEA decline affects so many different systems simultaneously. When DHEA levels are adequate, individual tissues, the brain, the skin, the bone, the muscle, the cardiovascular system, the reproductive tissue can produce the specific sex hormones they require locally in the concentrations they need without depending entirely on gonadal hormone production. When DHEA declines by 80%, as it does by age 65, this local hormone supply chain is severely disrupted throughout the body simultaneously. Every tissue that was drawing on DHEA as a precursor is now working with a fraction of the raw material it previously had available. The medical term for this age-related decline is adrenopause. Unlike menopause, which is a relatively rapid and widely recognized hormonal transition, adrenopause is gradual, spanning 4 decades from approximately age 25 to age 65, and it receives almost no clinical attention in routine medical care. A study published in the Journal of Clinical Endocrinology and Metabolism measuring DHEAS levels across the human lifespan confirmed that the decline is linear, consistent, and essentially universal. By age 70, fewer than 5% of adults maintain DHEA levels in the range considered optimal for health and vitality. The other 95% are running on a hormonal precursor supply that has been reduced to a fraction of what their tissues were designed to work with. Now, let us look at what that reduction actually costs, system by system, because the consequences are more specific and more interconnected than a general statement about aging would suggest. The first consequence involves energy metabolism. DHEA influences cellular energy production through its interaction with peroxisome proliferator activated receptors, or PPARs, which are nuclear receptors that regulate the expression of genes involved in fatty acid oxidation and mitochondrial biogenesis. Research published in the journal Steroids found that DHEA activates PPAR-alpha in liver and muscle tissue, upregulating the metabolic pathways that allow cells to use fat as an efficient fuel source. When DHEA levels decline, PPAR-alpha activation decreases, fat oxidation efficiency drops, and cells become more dependent on glucose as their primary fuel. The result is an energy pattern that many people over 65 recognize intimately: adequate energy after a meal when glucose is available, but persistent fatigue between meals, in the morning before eating, and during any activity that demands sustained effort. The cellular machinery for efficient fat burning has been partially switched off by the absence of the hormonal signal that kept it running. The second consequence involves mood and psychological resilience. DHEA's role in the brain is one of the most fascinating dimensions of its biology and one of the least discussed in mainstream wellness conversations. In the brain, DHEA acts as a neurosteroid, meaning it directly modulates the activity of neurotransmitter receptors without being converted into other hormones first. Specifically, DHEA is a positive modulator of NMDA receptors and a negative modulator of GABA-A receptors. Research published in the journal Biological Psychiatry demonstrated that DHEA administration in adults over 60 produced significant improvements in depression scores and vitality. A study from the NIMH found antidepressant effects comparable to conventional medication through a distinct neurochemical mechanism. The practical consequence of this neurosteroid function is that DHEA decline contributes to the emotional narrowing that many people over 65 experience but struggle to articulate. The world feels slightly less interesting than it used to. Pleasurable activities produce less of the response they once generated. The motivation to initiate is slightly but persistently diminished. This is not depression in the clinical sense, necessarily. It is a neurochemical flatness produced by a brain operating without the NMDA modulatory support. The third consequence involves intimate well-being, and here DHEA's role operates through multiple simultaneous pathways that make it uniquely central to this dimension of health after 65. For men, DHEA is a significant contributor to circulating testosterone levels through local conversion in testicular and peripheral tissue. As DHEA declines, this contribution to testosterone supply diminishes, compounding the age-related decline in gonadal testosterone production. Research published in the Journal of Clinical Endocrinology and Metabolism found that DHEAS levels were among the strongest predictors of total and free testosterone in men over 60. Men with higher DHEAS maintained testosterone levels significantly above age-matched peers and reported measurably higher energy, drive, and intimate interest. For women, DHEA's role in intimate well-being after menopause is arguably even more direct. Following menopause, when ovarian estrogen and progesterone production ceases, DHEA-derived androgens become the primary source of both testosterone and a portion of locally produced estrogens in peripheral tissues, including vaginal tissue, skin, and bone. A landmark study published in the New England Journal of Medicine found that postmenopausal women with the highest DHEAS levels reported significantly better intimate comfort, drive, and relationship satisfaction than those with the lowest levels. The research was sufficiently compelling that a DHEA-based vaginal preparation has since received FDA approval, the first time a DHEA-based treatment has received regulatory recognition for intimate health in this population. Beyond its sex hormone precursor role, DHEA directly influences vascular function relevant to intimate well-being through endothelial nitric oxide synthase. When DHEA declines, endothelial nitric oxide production declines with it, contributing to the vascular dimension of intimate changes. The hormonal and vascular pathways are woven together. The fourth consequence is immune resilience. DHEA has well-documented immunomodulatory effects, including the ability to counteract the immunosuppressive effects of cortisol. The immune system operates under higher effective cortisol influence and lower DHEA support, contributing to the increased susceptibility to infection, slower wound healing, and higher inflammatory baseline that characterize immune aging. As DHEA declines with age while cortisol remains stable or increases, the immune system operates under higher effective cortisol influence, contributing to increased susceptibility to infection and slower healing. A study from Stanford University found that DHEAS levels were among the strongest hormonal predictors of immune function, correlating directly with more robust T-cell and natural killer cell activity. The adrenal glands produce DHEA from cholesterol through a biosynthetic pathway that requires several specific nutritional cofactors. Providing those cofactors through diet is the most fundamental nutritional strategy. The adrenal glands produce DHEA from cholesterol through a biosynthetic pathway that requires several specific nutritional cofactors. Providing those cofactors through diet is the most fundamental nutritional strategy. The first critical cofactor is vitamin B5, also called pantothenic acid. It is essential for the synthesis of coenzyme A, which is required at multiple steps in the conversion toward DHEA. Foods richest include avocado, sunflower seeds, and shiitake mushrooms. The second critical cofactor is vitamin C. The adrenal glands contain the highest concentration of vitamin C of any tissue in the body, using it as a direct participant in the reactions that convert precursors toward DHEA. Whole food sources of vitamin C are preferable because they deliver it alongside flavonoids that enhance its bioavailability. Kiwi fruit, red bell peppers, guava, papaya, and strawberries are excellent sources. The third dietary factor is dietary fat quality, specifically the availability of cholesterol and essential fatty acids. DHEA synthesis begins with cholesterol, and very low-fat diets can compromise its production. Omega-3 fatty acids from fatty fish including salmon, sardines, and mackerel improve the fluidity and receptor sensitivity of adrenal cell membranes, supporting more efficient steroidogenic enzyme activity. A practical dietary framework includes consistent intake of pantothenic acid-rich foods, vitamin C-rich whole foods, and moderate healthy fats, with emphasis on omega-3s. This is a specific nutritional emphasis, not a dramatic overhaul. Under conditions of chronic physiological or psychological stress, the adrenal glands prioritize cortisol production, diverting pregnenolone away from the DHEA pathway. This diversion is sometimes called the pregnenolone steal, and it means that chronic stress is not simply exhausting in the ordinary sense. It is biochemically suppressing DHEA output by consuming the shared precursor that DHEA synthesis requires. Ashwagandha is the most thoroughly researched adaptogenic herb for cortisol modulation. Its active compounds reduce cortisol output by inhibiting the HPA axis response. Studies show it can reduce cortisol by 27.9% while increasing DHEAS.PO. Phosphatidylserine is a second compound with specific and well-documented cortisol-modulating effects through a different mechanism. Phosphatidylserine is a phospholipid found in high concentrations in neural cell membranes. It influences cortisol regulation through its effects on hippocampal glucocorticoid receptor sensitivity. The hippocampus plays a critical role in the negative feedback loop that tells the adrenal glands to reduce cortisol output. Research published in the journal Neurology found that phosphatidylserine supplementation in older adults significantly blunted the cortisol response and improved cognitive performance. Research published in the journal Neurology found that phosphatidylserine supplementation in older adults significantly blunted the cortisol response and improved cognitive performance. There is also a sleep-cortisol connection worth making explicit here. Cortisol follows a circadian rhythm, peaking in the early morning and declining through the day. PO. Sleep deprivation disrupts this rhythm, elevating evening cortisol and creating a state of nocturnal cortisol dominance that suppresses DHEA synthesis during the overnight hours. Improving sleep quality directly reduces this nocturnal cortisol disruption. Sleep and DHEA support each other. Better sleep reduces cortisol, which supports DHEA. Higher DHEA facilitates deeper sleep. PO. Improving sleep quality directly reduces this nocturnal cortisol disruption. Sleep and DHEA support each other. Better sleep reduces cortisol, which supports DHEA. Higher DHEA facilitates deeper sleep. PO. This is meaningfully different from cardiovascular exercise. Progressive resistance exercise produces acute and chronic increases in DHEA output from the adrenal glands. PO. This is meaningfully different from cardiovascular exercise. Progressive resistance exercise produces acute and chronic increases in DHEA output from the adrenal glands. POI. The mechanism involves two pathways. The first is the sympathetic nervous system activation that occurs during resistance exercise, which stimulates adrenal output broadly, including DHEA, through catecholamine-mediated adrenal stimulation. The second and more sustained pathway involves the anti-inflammatory effect of regular resistance training, which reduces the chronic low-grade inflammatory signaling that suppresses adrenal steroidogenesis. Research has shown that elevated inflammatory cytokines, particularly IL-6 and TNF-alpha, directly inhibit the activity of the steroidogenic enzymes involved in DHEA synthesis. By reducing systemic inflammatory burden, resistance training creates an adrenal environment where these enzymes operate more efficiently. A study published in the European Journal of Applied Physiology measured DHEAS levels in adults over 65 before and after a 12-week progressive resistance training program. Participants who trained 3 times per week using compound movements showed a significant increase in DHEAS levels, averaging 19% above their baseline. The control group showed no significant change. The DHEAS increases correlated directly with improvements in muscle strength, self-reported energy levels, and mood scores, suggesting that the hormonal change was functionally meaningful rather than merely biochemical. The specific characteristics of the exercise that produce this response matter. Compound movements that engage large muscle groups simultaneously, squats, lunges, deadlifts, rows, presses, produce a greater hormonal response than isolation exercises. Progressive overload, gradually increasing the challenge over weeks, maintains the stimulus for adaptation and continued hormonal response. And adequate recovery between sessions, with resistance training performed 2 to 3 times per week rather than daily, allows the adrenal and neuroendocrine response to consolidate between sessions rather than being continuously depleted by excessive frequency. For adults over 65 who may not have a resistance training background, the entry point does not need to be a gym. Bodyweight squats, resistance band rows, and wall push-ups produce the same hormonal stimulus at a lower mechanical load. Research found that even low-load resistance training produced significant DHEAS increases in older adults when performed with sufficient repetitions to create metabolic challenge. This finding is important because it means that adults with joint limitations can access the hormonal benefits of resistance training through appropriately scaled protocols. The combination of resistance training with the dietary framework and cortisol management creates a compounding effect. The diet provides the raw materials. Cortisol management removes the suppressive force. Resistance training provides the hormonal stimulus. Together, they create the conditions for the adrenal glands to produce DHEA at the highest level their biological age allows, and for the downstream effects to be expressed as fully as possible. The pattern that emerges from research has a human shape worth tracing carefully. The decline of DHEA is so gradual, so spread across decades, that no single year produces a change dramatic enough to demand attention. Consider a 68-year-old woman who had been a high-energy person for most of her adult life. In her late 50s, she began noticing that her recovery from stress was slower and her enthusiasm required more effort to access. What happens instead is a slow accumulation of small shifts that together produce a person who feels fundamentally less themselves than they did 10 years ago, without identifying when or why it began. When she learned about DHEA and found her levels in the lowest quartile, she had a framework for the first time. She began building nutritional cofactors, incorporating ashwagandha, and starting a resistance training program. Her patience was thinner, and her interest in physical closeness had become something she needed to consciously choose. She mentioned fatigue to her doctor, who suggested she was overdoing it. Nobody measured her DHEAS. At 6 months, her DHEAS levels had increased to the median range for her age group. Her energy, mood, and intimate well-being had followed the hormonal trajectory upward. She was operating with adrenal DHEA output at approximately 15% of what it had been at her biological peak, with cortisol dominance suppressing what little DHEA production remained, and with a dietary and exercise pattern that provided no specific support for adrenal steroidogenesis. Her body was doing exactly what the biology predicts, and the conventional medical assessment she received had no framework for recognizing it. The most important finding was that improvements continued to develop across the full 6 months. The biology was still responding. Consistency over 6 months or longer produces outcomes that shorter commitments cannot replicate. A study from the University of California, San Diego, following 46 adults over 65 through a 6-month DHEA supportive lifestyle intervention, found that participants showed significant improvements across all 3 domains we have discussed: energy measured by validated fatigue scales, mood measured by standardized psychological assessment tools, and intimate well-being measured by the validated Female Sexual Function Index and International Index of Erectile Function, respectively. The improvements correlated directly with increases in DHEAS levels, confirming the hormonal mechanism rather than a non-specific lifestyle effect. DHEA sits at the center of a cascade that sustains energy, maintains mood, supports intimate well-being, and protects immune resilience. When its production is specifically supported, all of these systems begin to recover together. The researchers concluded that the timeline for meaningful DHEA-supported recovery in older adults extends well beyond the 8 to 12 weeks that many shorter studies use as endpoints, and that consistency over 6 months or longer produces outcomes that shorter commitments cannot replicate. It is never too late to give your adrenal glands what they need to do more of what they were designed to do. I want to end with a thought about recognition. PO. When it declines by 80%, which it does in most people by age 65, all of these systems are simultaneously affected, and when its production is specifically supported through the nutritional cofactors that adrenal steroidogenesis requires, through the cortisol management that reduces pregnenolone steal, and through the resistance training that provides the hormonal stimulus for adrenal output, all of these systems begin to recover together because they share the same upstream driver. What the science of DHEA offers is not a cure. It is a framework, a way of understanding a specific biological reality that allows the stories of inevitable decline to be replaced by a more accurate and hopeful narrative. There is a specific kind of suffering that comes from experiencing a real biological change in your body and having no framework for understanding it. When you feel tired in ways you cannot explain, when your mood has narrowed in ways you cannot attribute to any specific cause, when the intimacy and vitality that once felt natural have quietly receded and you cannot point to a reason, the absence of a framework does not make the experience more bearable. It makes it worse because the mind fills the explanatory void with stories. Stories about getting old, about relationships running their natural course, about being someone whose best years are behind them, about accepting limitations that were never truly inevitable. You now have a more accurate story about your hormonal system. You know what DHEA is, what its decline costs, and what specific, evidence-based natural strategies address it. That replacement of story is itself therapeutic, independent of any physical change it motivates, because the way we narrate our own aging shapes how we engage with it, and whether we bring curiosity and agency to it, or simply deference to a trajectory we believe we cannot influence. If this conversation opened something for you, I would genuinely like to hear about it in the comments below. Every comment enriches the conversation for everyone here. You have a timeline for recovery that is realistic, but genuinely hopeful. And you have the most important thing that any health information can provide, a reason to engage with your own biology as something that responds to you, rather than something that simply happens to you. Share this video with someone in your life who has been attributing their diminished vitality to age without ever having had a framework to understand what the biology is actually doing. That framework is itself a gift. And if you want to continue exploring the specific hormonal, nutritional, and lifestyle science of what it means to age with fullness and vitality, subscribe and stay with this channel. Every conversation we have here begins from the same premise. Your body is more responsive than you have been told, and the biology of healthy aging has more to offer than resignation. Every conversation we have here begins from the same premise. Your body is more responsive than you have been told. I will see you in the next one.